Let's talk about key symbols and markings for the National Airspace System on VFR charts. Class A airspace basically is not usually shown on VFR charts because it starts at 18,000 feet, goes up to flight level 600, and covers the entire US. So it's not depicted on VFR charts because VFR flights are not permitted in Class A airspace. Class B, on the other hand, are indicated as a solid blue line with a series of concentric circles surrounding the major airports. Think of an upside down wedding cake. The chart indicates vertical limits of each segment, for example, surface to 10,000 or 4,000 to 10,000, showing where the airspace starts at the surface or at higher altitudes. Class B airspace is typically found around the busiest airports. Think Seattle Tacoma International Airport, or LAX, Chicago O'Hare, New York LaGuardia, Philadelphia, all kinds of airports. Class C airspace is depicted as a solid magenta line, usually with two tiers, centered around airports with moderate traffic. Like Class B airspace, the vertical limits are marked on the chart. The inner circle typically extends from the surface to the specified altitude, and the outer circle starts at a higher altitude above the ground. Class D airspace, on the other hand, is depicted by dashed blue lines forming a circle or irregular shape around airports with control towers, but lower traffic volume than Class C. The vertical extent of the airspace is typically noted in the charts from surface to 2,500 feet, indicating that it starts at the surface and extends to 2,500 feet AGL or above ground level. Dashed magenta lines indicate Class E airspace starting at the surface. Faded magenta lines indicating Class E airspace starting at 700 feet. Faded blue lines indicate Class E airspace starting at 1,200 feet AGL. Class E airspace typically serves as controlled airspace for aircraft transitioning to and from the terminal or route environments. Class G is close to the ground, not explicitly marked, but understood to exist below Class E airspace, typically from the surface up to 700 feet or 1,200 feet AGL, depending on the area. Class G is an uncontrolled airspace, where ATC services are not provided and generally found in rural or remote areas. Now let's talk about practical uses of airspace symbols on VFR charts. Pilots use these symbols to understand where they need to establish communication with ATC, where specific airspace restrictions apply, and to plan their routes to avoid restricted or prohibited areas. Before a flight, pilots should review the VFR chart to ensure that they are aware of all the airspace classes that they will be flying through, noting the required altitudes and communication requirements for each airspace segment. During the flight, pilots continuously refer to the chart to stay within the correct airspace, adjust altitude as needed, and to avoid entering restricted or prohibited areas without clearance. All right, folks, if you've made it this far without dozing off, very impressive. Tip of the cap. Now that you're officially a helicopter nerd like me, why not take the next step? Check out my online helicopter ground school at 3gheliprep.com. Trust me, it'll only get more exciting from here, or at least more useful.